We're here with Paul and Jiji, guitarists from Wellington melodic death metal band Dark Divinity, who are releasing their debut full-length album Unholy Rapture on September 22nd. They'll also be getting back in front of Wellingtonians later this year with a headlining slot at Wellington's Symbiotic Metal Fest on October 21st, and opening for Californian death metal band Skeletal Remains on November 22nd. Thanks for coming along, guys. So just got a few questions about the album and some of the process. So, what's your favourite song on the album, and why?
For me, it's Mist of the Old Gods, which is one that we just released a video for and released as a single. Because I sort of feel like it was kind of written at a reasonably late stage in the process and felt like it's got everyone's influence coming through really strongly. And sort of brings a few new textures and ideas and I guess songwriting approaches that we haven't tried so much of before, but it's still got that recognisable sound. And yeah, I think that's one of my favourite overall. There's about 3 or 4 more that come under that category, but yeah, at the moment that's definitely my favourite.
So I was going to say Mist of the Old Gods as well, since Paul's already picked that. I'm going to say Forbidden. Yeah, it's a pretty solid tune. It's got a really catchy riff and pretty groovy as well, and it's got a good involvement in all of the members. Paul's got his own moments there. The vocals pretty sick. The whole arrangement's really, it makes sense. And I got it was supposed to be Reece's solo to be in that song, but
Back in the day.
But yeah, so I sort of re-recorded a version of the original solo, which had the memorable parts of the original solo, but
the bits that Ian wanted.
And then pretty much injected my own style and stuff like that. But yeah, Mist of the Old Gods as well. I'm just gonna say it's a good tune because it sort of displays this new sound. It's really good. Yeah.
So yeah, you talked about some of your own flavour and the solos and things like that. So I was going to ask, what are some of your biggest influences when it comes to playing in Dark Divinity?
Sometimes it's kind of stuff that's quite far removed from what we actually play. So I sort of think for a lot of heavy music for me is creating an atmosphere, and so there's a lot of stuff like Russian Circles and Cult of Luna which actually come into that influence. Maybe not in terms of how we technically play the riffs but creating a sense of, I guess, foreboding and keeping that consistent across the song. But then there's a lot of I think particularly writing some of the riffs and some of these songs was going back to some of the older stuff like Clayman, the In Flames, and At the Gates stuff, and Death, sort of like Sound of Perseverance and those kind of bands. Just in terms of they're great songs, and I think it's for me it's always what's going to come first, and songs that kind of constantly surprise you. So I don't like it when you just have a track that feels like you've heard everything within the first 2 minutes. There's always something, whether it's you're heightening it at the end through the drums and the vocals shifting, or a guitar solo, or a key change, so there's a lot of that kind of influence I think comes through.
Well, when I joined the band, the guys had already written most of the songs, or actually most of the songs were already structured, so I pretty much applied myself with finding spots for moments for like stuff like guitar solos and stuff. So I guess the main influences at that time I was listening to a lot of Vital Remains. Dave Suzuki from Vital Remains is a huge influence for me for this style of guitar playing. So I guess by way of solos, some of that style sort of projected in the Dark Divinity tunes.
Unholy Rapture was kind of completed over a period where you weren't playing live as much. There's been, COVID. There's been lineup changes and things like that. In terms of impact on the sort of final songwriting and putting together of the album, has it had any impact that it hasn't actually been out in the live sphere as much?
I think possibly, like, to go back to some of like Missed Video Gods and certain sections on some of the other songs which were developed, probably being more in that like bedroom guitarist mode of sitting and experimenting with things and experimenting with sounds. For me, some of that stuff might not have happened if things were more like in the room, because I guess it offers you that opportunity to do things that perhaps are not as easy to recreate live, but still can provide a great springing off point for an influence, to influence the song as a whole. Yeah, and I think so. That's what's been exciting now, is like getting back to jamming in the room, and realizing that we can play, at least 70% of the songs. I think that's what's been exciting, is just seeing how good I think everyone collectively in the band is at what they do, and you get that human interaction going on. I think that makes it all the more exciting. It's sort of like the songs are emerging out of the album and becoming something in the live realm, which I think is really exciting.
I think the lockdown or the pandemic sort of allowed us time to finalize or play around with arrangements as well. Being in our own spaces, each of us have got our own sort of home studio set up, so we got to play around with ideas, send each other stems back and forth, and eventually got to the final arrangements of some of the tunes that were still sort of pending at that time.
Yeah, definitely. And we've always done things that way, I think, where we've all had that ability to record things and send things back and forth. So things can happen quite quickly, and you're cutting out some of that sort of that in between stuff where you're chatting in between songs that you're playing together and things. So I think some of that really assisted getting to kind of the end of that recording, or that writing process at least, and then recording as well.
So you guys both play in other projects. Jiji playing in Scorn Creation, Paul, you playing Into Orbit. I'm noting that you can get all of those albums from Wellington City Libraries. So is there anything you guys change in your approach, whether that's like mental or technique, or pretty much any change at all when you go from one project to Dark Divinity?
We're both the sole guitarist in those bands.
Oh.
So you are the only guitarist.
Yeah.
So I think for me, with Into Orbit, there's a kind of a liberating thing in that I know there's two guitars there, and that we can do things that aren't dependent on a loop pedal. So things can all change at once, and so you can do a lot more in terms of arrangement. And I think probably play slightly differently, because there's a lot you can fill out. With when you're the only melodic instrument in a band, you can turn any crazy kind of sound or squeal or even unmusical things can turn into an event in a song. And that definitely happens, I think, in Into Orbit at times. It's like you're using quite unconventional things that would sound pretty interesting. Well, not interesting. Could sound unusual, like in a traditional setup, or maybe not even get heard. So, I think it's quite freeing to just play guitar and to just worry about your kind of part of the frequency range and what you're kind of meant to offer, and not step on too many toes, and remember that there's other people and other parts that need to come to the fore, and so I think that's what about you?
Well, I guess the difference with Scorn, my role in Scorn Creation and with Dark Divinity is there's a huge, well, I wouldn't say huge, but there's a contrast in musical styles. Dark Divinity is more of like a melodic type of death metal band, where Scorn's more like old school, straightforward death metal with sort of like busy parts. So I guess with saying that, being the only guitarist of Scorn, I sort of like, when I'm writing riffs, because at the moment we're also sort of writing stuff, I try to think of parts that sort of compromises what two guitarists would sound. So it's sort of like those types of riffs that would cover like sort of a bigger frequency or role in the band. Whereas with Dark Divinity, I'm sort of like very aware of my role in, and which is really exciting working with another guitarist, because Paul's style and my style are quite different, and we sort of found a way to make that work perfectly, which I think you'll hear in Unholy Rapture. So yeah, it's pretty much just knowing my role in this bigger sound that the band produces. So for Dark Divinity, yeah.
It's all self-recorded by you guys. It's all mixed in-house by Jesse, as I understand it, the vocalist, and it's all self-released. So it's pretty much as DIY as it gets, especially for death metal, where it's not necessarily as common. What works about that approach for you guys that you sort of keep sticking with it?
I think you sort of, in a lot of ways, feel a sense of control over the final product. I really enjoyed having Jesse doing the mixing this time around, because he's a guitar player himself, so it was kind of, along with Jiji, it was getting that sense of perspective, like one on things when they sound, you're worried some things doesn't sound good, and you can get someone's perspective on things. He also has, more technical nous than me in terms of how to approach guitars and tracking and things like that. So I think, it was quite comforting to have someone you are interacting with as a fellow member and artist, so they're in the tracks themselves, and they're probably easier to communicate in some ways in terms of the conversations we had back and forth. And I think the tracking side of things, I think the fact is that we're all working day jobs, we're all like living a normal, we're not professional musicians, so we can do things at 10 or 12 at night. You can do things in the weekend. You're not having to fit it into just your your usual work hours. And I think, and not having to take time off to book a studio, things like that. So I think that's a big part of it is like freedom. I mean, we've used pretty much exclusively digital modeling for the album, and that's great. And again, that's like a freedom that if you're having to keep going back in and retracking things with the same amp setup and mic setup, and so that's an economical factor as well, I think, for us. And it makes things easy as well for getting tracks to one another. We can have complete control over tones and things like that. So I think there's a lot of benefits to it. Do you feel that it works pretty well for you?
Yeah. Myself and Paul are big fans of Neural DSP, so we were able to.
T-shirt.
Neural DSP. So we sort of geeked out on tones so we could produce with these plugins, and working in that sort of context, like from our home studio setups, actually allows us time to reevaluate certain recording stems or tones or approaches. So it really gives us time to sort of polish any parts that we recorded, and it's just exciting actually, and I think it saves more time as well, rather than having to meet up every week, and because you realize a lot of stuff after a session's already done, and you'd have to like message your family and stuff like that. But with working at home, you can just collect your thoughts properly, and then reassess stuff that the band's done, and then revisit it easily.
Calm your nerves.
Calm your nerves. Not get too excited about parts. And
delete a
stuff
few
like
messages.
Messages and
that's true.
Any thoughts on the sort of the last third of that, sort of recording and mixed in house and stuff, but just the self-releasing kind of thing, like no label support, nothing like that. You just put it out. You've had it printed on CD and vinyl, all done in house. Is it sort of the same level of control over that? You determine how it's sort of presented?
Yeah, I mean, I just really want to say as a plug for Ian, like he does a phenomenal job in terms of, I think, his approach with everything is sort of bridging that gap between that you've got this independent side of things, but also making it as professional as you see the big kind of labels doing, but having freedom to sort of over the way you present yourself and in the way that you write about your own music and talk about it to say media or to fans, and I think that's like certainly something like we're trying to get a real sense of is just seeing the way that other bands approach that kind of thing. And I don't know any other way. I mean, I've never been on a band with a label, so I'm not quite sure how that works. But I think it's certainly like so far you can see other bands that do it. There's a lot of work involved, and there's a lot of work beyond just the music. But it really does mean you can control the way things come out, the content that's being posted and things, and that's a huge part nowadays with social media.
Pretty much what he said. He's done a lot of, pretty massive work in the sidelines, and so shout out to him.
Yeah, for sure.
And Jesse as well.
We're seeing international heavy music touring circuit get back to New Zealand. We've got Blood Incantation, we've got Skeletal Remains that you guys are opening for, Vader, and now Mayhem, all scheduled to play in the next few months. Are there any bucket list bands you'd like to see make it to New Zealand?
I think they've probably already come, but I've actually only recently, probably last year, got into Gojira, so I would love to see them, just based on the YouTube videos I've seen of them live. I'm trying to think. What about you?
Yeah. Well, Mayhem is definitely one of the bucket list bands. So they're beyond, we need to see them.
It's exciting though, hearing.
Yeah,
I only started listening to Blood Incantation. So we started listening to them the other day, and I picked the ambient album.
Oh,
so
right,
I got
yeah.
halfway through and I was like, this is so sick. I was like, but is this? And then I realised there's other stuff.
Yeah, it is. When do the riffs start?
But no, that's it's super exciting and definitely pre-pandemic. I guess we made. I would love to see some of those Swedish death metal bands that we talked about earlier.
Sure,
Pre-pandemic, we had the opportunity with Haunted and At the Gates. This feels like a decade ago, but it was that was exciting. There was all of that coming through with Ben getting bands across, and so if that that's starting to happen again, it's pretty exciting, and hopefully some opportunities as well for us. We've got that small slot coming up anyway, so that'll be cool.
Thanks for the interview, guys. So
right.
You're releasing Unholy Rapture on September 22nd. You can order it on darkdivinity.co.nz on CD or vinyl. And once it's out, you'll also be able to borrow a copy from Wellington City Libraries.